Delves look to be on track towards a bright future, so let's chat about what we want later on. Meanwhile, depending on who you're talking to, Mythic Plus is the worst it's ever been, and it's 100% Blizzard's fault. Hey, it's Soul, and this is Warcraft Weekly, where the copium thrives. You can help support the channel by hitting the like button, subscribing for more coverage, and of course, catching me live on Twitch or YouTube or wherever. One more plug, this coming Monday, I plan on streaming the new Diablo 4 expansion, which launches Monday, 4 p.m. Pacific. There's going to be drops and a supporter streamer promotion thing happening, so if you're interested in at least seeing what's new, come on down. And I'll be honest, I barely know what's happening myself, so we get to discover all these new things together. Let's talk about how lucrative Delves have become and how Blizzard's working towards making a sort of ecosystem with it. As expected, there was an additional quest on top of the passive bonus to brand XP and Delver's journey progress and undercoins. The quest itself is modest, you just gotta complete 5 delves at any difficulty for a piece of champion gear. I noticed some backlash like, hey dude, it's already easy enough to get champion gear, it should be hero gear, but I'm also not surprised, because if 5 time-walking dungeons gave champion gear, then the delve quest, that makes plenty of sense. It's easy to forget that delves are doing 2 basic things: to give endgame players a supplementary or alternative, maybe even a replacement for their current endgame, and to welcome a new audience who isn't used to this sort of gameplay. This week a hotfix made it so profane tinderboxes also have a chance of dropping at the end of any delve. Now, I want to kind of reset perspectives and let's consider a freshly leveled character in the warband. Now let's assume that you've also been working on your warband, gaining reputation and doing whatever it is that you're doing, and let's look at what a fresh alt can immediately do. They can zip around to each of the War Within quartermasters to get a starting boost of Valor Stones and crests. They can suck up currencies from the warband to buy some other starting epics and pull whatever's available out of the warbank. They'll get 4 delve keys from these quartermasters, which equal guaranteed veteran or champion gear, and they can do their first round of weekly activities to get 4 more. Especially with this week with the event, completing 5 delves total scores us a little bit more of everything, with stuff waiting for us in the vault for next week. I know I've been saying this a lot, but without even getting into a single group, new characters got it real good in the War Within. There were certain assumptions I had about the so-called delve economy I had wrong, like I thought the more rare materials like tinderboxes and ingots would only be found from delves, and for better or worse that didn't turn out to be the case. But I was right in claiming delves would thrive overall with rewards and accessible gameplay, minus the community that would intermingle or have this collective voice, because yeah, people do make groups, but more precisely, they decide to make groups, while the rest do delves their way. In a way, we can claim World of Warcraft can be a largely solo adventure inside this online persistent world more than ever. From leveling to follower dungeons to the story mode raid thing to progression inside delves for endgame gear, we can spotlight that as a sort of complete package and start thinking up some feedback as soon as I clear my throat. Should an MMO be a forced multiplayer experience, or should we have a shared space where we have options? Is this sort of experience a good introduction to the World of Warcraft before dipping into group content, if at all? Is this the right way to do it? I think it's safe to say that so far delves are being pretty well received. It's not perfect, there are questions of balance between class and role balance and scaling with groups and brand being brand, but what about the future of delves? I've been one to keep saying, hey, let's kind of slow things down and let delves breathe for a while before introducing sweeping changes and suggestions, but screw that. I want to use this time to start up some discussions on what we might get next season or next expansion. Like, how can delves grow? What areas should be touched on more or maybe left alone? This is a pretty open talk. I'm going to share some ideas that I've heard about, some I'm going to come up with on my own, and I hope we can just talk about it in the comments without shooting each other down, at least, not too much. Variety in delves is sort of a hot button topic. Delve-focused people are naturally getting a little bit bored by now, running the same 30 or so delves between the delves themselves and the rotating stories. We know Brand's going to be replaced by a new follower in the next season, but Are we going to get new additional stories or new replacement stories? You know what I mean? Like, I'm hoping to see new delves introduced with new zones as we move from patch to patch, or, you know, maybe we'll get a zone and then 2 new delves in that zone and then stories to add for the existing delves. That sounds pretty reasonable to me, at least. Moving from Season 1 to Season 2 delves, that's going to need some finer touches though. People are already asking questions like, hey, what's going to happen to our keys or our radiant echoes and the undercoins? And what about the cosmetics from the delve track? What's going to happen with that? Or is that and the Zekfir skin, is that going to be a FOMO seasonal reward? Or will those show up somewhere else someday, like a future delve track or the shop or the trading post? I mentioned starter keys for fresh alts. What sort of delve keys will characters get from renowned vendors in Season 2? I'm bringing up keys twice because, like, I don't want it to feel like the strategy is to amass keys now, and then when Season 2 drops, I'm going to have like tons of keys to, you know, run to get 4 champion pieces per day until I run out. That would be very excessive, right? So I confidently predict that at the start of Season 2, there's going to be this big old conversion, complete with, of course, you know, a long maintenance. Season 1 currencies are likely to get dusted. Season 2 bountiful keys will drop at the start of the season and not during the week 1 preseason, meaning there's going to be like no sudden burst of champion gear. Delves, Mythic Zeros, and Mythic Plus, you know, and rated PvP, and all the raid difficulties, everything's going to open up at once, giving everyone an even start and maybe a meltdown for those who want to do everything. The idea of outdoor delves, it sounds like a contradictory thing, but you know, this takes after what we call dungeons that happen to just capture an outdoor area, and, you know, they just lay some mobs down and say, ta-da, it's a dungeon now. There's no shortage of areas across all of Khazargar's zones that could be repurposed as a delve by simply talking to an NPC or standing on the marker and then starting the delve. And I've heard lots of chatter over adding more delves to legacy zones and other spaces. At first I was like, nah, I don't want to go all the way to like Northrend to do a delve just because it happens to be bountiful. But what if we put a spin on that? What about time walking delves? Like, we go to a certain area and it's sort of transformed into a little something else from the past. Some of you who played through Battle for Azeroth, there's like 50 of you, played through this reimagined version of Mechagon when Judgment Day happened. That sort of thing would be really neat. There's also a list of candidates who could be the next delve companion. Now, Dagran is not on the top of my list, but I hear a lot of mentions about him being the top of their lists. Rexar would feel super overpowered. I mean, okay, he'd be really cool, but I'm worried that he and his buddies would make... I'm worried that it would make it look like a follower dungeon instead of a delve. I joked that we would see Nathana's Blightcaller's disembodied head like, haha, I never died, or something like that. Then, you know, this is what he's reduced to, but, you know, that's just a joke. I don't have a good guess myself as to who's going to be the next delve companion, but I'm going to wager that they probably are going to meet certain criteria. One is that they're a little bit less attached to the main story. So, you know, we're not going to see Thrall or Anduin or Ilaria, but they can at least be present. So I can imagine a faction-specific companion who has virtually the same abilities. So the Horde will get Lady Liandrin, and the Alliance will get Terralion, if we're saving him for Midnight. Now that'd be cool. It's a little bit of faction pride and a melee character who will hopefully do a better job holding threat when needed. Then again, isn't that kind of a departure from what delves ought to be, which is more or less like, you know, a focus on exploration? I mean, maybe that's okay because we ended up killing a lot of bad guys in these delves. My attention also goes towards the Heronir, the race of troll elf kind of people that we briefly encounter in Ashkahet. From the lore, they're very reclusive and would rather not have anything to do with us, but I'm sure there's more story to be told, and that could lead to maybe them breaking their traditions and adventure on with us. There are a lot of possibilities, so now it's your turn. Who do you think is next? We should also talk about what's in the future for delves, because there's been polarizing feedback over what should be done with gearing in this feature. One camp suggests there should be even higher tiers or endless tiers managed by a timer, including a path towards obtaining Gilded Crest or even Myth gear. So it definitely sounds like some want a solo Mythic Plus of sorts. Personally, I'm not a fan, but we'll talk more on Mythic Plus itself a bit later. Another camp is like, no, delves need to get like pushed down somehow because, never mind the easy champion and hero gear, they shouldn't have that because it chips away from that demographic of Mythic Plus world. Delves, these people are saying, should give gear slower, so those players come back to us. Again, I'm not a fan of that because I'd rather see Mythic Plus improve by having Mythic Plus improved, not by nerfing delves to get people to go away. Now, there are some pain points delve people may encounter in the near future. Some are seeing it now, others who are pure delve people are not going to see this for a while still, but at some point, players will be decked out with an item level of 619. That's equal to maximum champion gear, aka 4 out of 6 hero gear. To go any further, they're going to need to earn gilded crests, and delves don't offer a very friendly path to earning those. Let's pretend a delve person is fully kitted out in hero gear, and it's fully upgraded. Going forward, that player will need to collect gilded crests, and this path I'm talking about is to trade up runed crests at a rate of 6-1. They need to find 90 rune crests to trade them for 15 gilded, and a good chunk of that can be found from the Great Vault by not selecting anything from a full row and just opting to take the tokens that they can trade in for 45 rune crests. And by the way, there's a spattering of gilded crests that can be earned from using Delver's bounties, but those are very few and far between. At the moment, it remains to be seen if players will be upset that they won't be able to fully upgrade their hero gear to 6 out of 6. I mean, there's still the 1105 and 1107 patch, assuming that's going to be a thing, to add in some surprises. So consider this as feedback as we see it today, even though it's more like a tomorrow problem. I'm a bit torn on this because on the one hand, yeah, delve people plateau pretty hard at the 4 out of 6 level, which is better than a hard stop at the veteran level just one expansion ago, to be fair. I see there being a very fine line between, hey man, delves aren't giving enough crest, versus, hey look, raid and Mythic Plus people, delves are the way to farm for crests, and that's going to cause an immediate imbalance where people decide to play. If hard mode Zekfir dropped gildeds, would that feel fulfilling, or would it just be something to be farmed through the pre-made group tool? Does it send the message that there's something to strive for, or that there's like this hopeless goal while other players are able to easily attain it? So how about this? I have a little bit of an idea. What if at the end of the delve track, on top of being able to buy delve keys at a discount, each week we can buy one bag with 15 gilded crests inside. Maybe it'll cost a buttload of undercoins, but it's something that'll firmly put us on track to unlocking those mythic appearances on hero pieces of gear, or even max it out, or maybe, just maybe, craft a mythic piece of gear too. The raiders and the dungeon people, they can go for that too, but they'll also have to work a lot of delves for just a handful of crests compared to what they would normally do. So, maybe it's not the best idea, but I think it's a good jumping off point, or, something to discuss. It takes a while to get to, it requires participation in delves, it can be kind of cheesed with alts, and even after unlocking the purchase, it still needs lots of playtime in delves. It preserves that loop. Speaking for me, as usual though, I do draw the line at getting myth gear. I know that sounds like me gatekeeping, right? But I'm trying to identify this careful balance of satisfying players. I'm obviously not a designer, be thankful for that, but I'm wary about designing different systems that have the same reward at the end, in this case the myth track gear, but to try and define an equivalency on how it's earned when the reality is not all content is made equal. Is hard mode Zekfir, for example, the same as killing a mythic raid boss, and is it the same as clearing a mythic 9? No, but when presented with choices, players are definitely going to choose Zekfir as a path to rewards, which is likely to jack up participation in raids and keys, and I'm very confident in that take. And I want to see all of World of Warcraft succeed, even the parts of it I don't play. If I can get that feeling of progression in delves, and succeed as I get better gear from delves, and get access to maybe these mythic appearances with just a few more gilded crests, I think we'd be in a pretty good place where myth gear is nothing more than this unnecessary box to check when players could take that time to maybe play an alt or do other activities, or hey, even play other games. And I'd like to know what you think should happen later with delves, from rewards to the structure and everything, but we should turn things over and now talk about the state of Mythic Plus. I can't tell if Mythic Plus is the best or the worst that it's been because the takes are just one or the other. There's very little in between. It's hard to not notice a lot of folks on social media trashing delves because, especially in this season, lower level delves have been said to be a total nightmare, with groups breaking up at the first sign of trouble or even the last sign, with people leaving when the dungeon is nearly over, but it's clear that it won't be timed. Some of the blame has been directed towards delves due to, again, the accessibility of champion and hero gear. Now, as I understand it, doing delves instead of lower level keys for this kind of gear means less learning of the dungeons early on, which potentially means, or risks, lesser skilled players are trying to take on key levels that are beyond their experience. Delves get double blame, I guess, because some players who ran keys for gear are tired of the social meat grinder and they just want to play the game, so they're just doing delves instead of keys altogether, so fewer people. So Mythic Plus World's demographic has gone through a change we don't have a complete picture of yet, but from social media posts and other anecdotes, it seems clear that the lower band of keys is suffering while two groups are continuing to thrive. Players who are able to rise to that higher band, as in, plus 10s, and static groups. Those folks, they seem to be fine, or at least they trend to be fine. They're getting their Keystone Master and their hero portal things, and in support of Mythic Plus overall, they're making a point to say that they're having fun taking on and meeting these challenges. And keep in mind too, this is only the third week of the Mythic Plus season. There's plenty of time to meet our goals. A bit of hindsight, I mentioned this before, but I feel even more strongly now that Mythic Zeros and Mythic Plus, that they should have been released earlier in the War Within to give more players time to practice, giving progression-minded players very easy gearing opportunities through crafting and these front-loaded bountiful keys. They got players to progress, I guess, unnaturally fast through the first few key levels, I guess. But experience is just as, if not more important than item level. Thus, people were making mistakes, and there was poor performance, and then we got levers. What's harder to explain is what seems to be exceptionally less patience in part of players who seem more likely to leave than ever. It doesn't happen to everyone, but it's hard to ignore the outcry. I haven't done a single key myself, so I can't commentate as if I were a participant, but I have been observing, and I could ask you folks at home these two main questions. One, what's your experience been like so far in the season? And two, how has the communication been going in your runs, the ones that you have been doing? Do you chat things up before the dungeon begins? If the group leader isn't a tank, do they do any directing? Do they do pings? Do maybe even invites to voice chat? I feel so out of touch, but I'm just curious because it feels like all of these problems people run into with keys could be vetted through so easily if the group leader just took a few minutes to talk things over and have a game plan or set up comms and so on and so forth, because it might have taken a good while, like an hour or so, for this group to get together, and I figure the extra effort of communicating and setting expectations would be very well worth it. It's like some folks wait long minutes or hours to find or build a group, and then what, do they just kick back and cross their fingers? As the group leader, once the group is made, I imagine that their job isn't done, it just got started. Like, they got to set roles and get everyone on the same page, and if voice chat is involved, to help call things out or even give a pat on the back for a job well done. It's not easy building and leading a group. A lot of folks know that, and they scoff when they're just told, lol, just make the group, buddy. It wouldn't surprise me if most failed groups had leaders who just didn't care once the group was made. And I'm afraid some of the answers I'll get in the comments are like, nope, there were no comms, or wasn't a word until someone was raging out and that's it. Or maybe even not that, they just started leaving. Because this isn't a World of Warcraft thing, it's a cultural thing these days, folks. When certain folks, they just don't care about soft skills. They don't care that it's a human behind each character. They just care about their own convenience. So it's no wonder in these situations, a lot of people found an off-ramp with delves, and they'd rather play alone than deal with that gauntlet. So yeah, that's a great way to end the show. Woo! Next week, there's a non-zero chance we'll start seeing soft nerfs to the raid in the form of severed strands. The details are a little bit sparse, but basically you gotta kill bosses for credit towards building this buff, which will grow stronger each week. The credit can be shared across the warband, but we'll learn more as we go, and again, this may or may not be a thing starting next week. We'll just have to wait and see. It ought to be a sweet week for gearing though. Stay tuned for the Monday video. And one more reminder, I'll be streaming this coming Monday as well, this Monday afternoon, featuring Diablo 4 expansion related stuff. I hope you'll join me. And now let's take a second to thank the awesome folks who've been watching me on Twitch and YouTube. I'm going to try and do a little bit better by my Twitch folk. I've been struggling to acknowledge when people are like subbing and calling for roulette and even raids. Sorry, Taliesin and fam. Let's also say hi to our beloved patrons, along with newcomer Richard with a huge pledge. Thank you so much. And thanks to you, all y'all who made it to the end of these videos. It helps the good old algorithm, and I very, very much appreciate it. Please like the video, subscribe for more WoW coverage. Catch me live, and I'll catch you later. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.